With all 132 cards from Mean Streets of Gadgetzan revealed, I spent yesterday night staying up until 6 a.m. Building decks for them, like theorycrafting if they would be any good. And I have to say I'm very optimistic about this expansion. What I'm going to do with this review is I'm going to group the cards into 5 buckets. I'll rate them either 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, 4 star, or 5 star. A 1 star means I think it's absolute trash with no hope whatsoever. For 2, I think it's bad, but it has like a small amount of niche possibility. For 3 star, I think it has some potential. For 4 star, I think the card is good and we'll see some play. And for 5 star, I think the card is great. This 1 star section is going to go really fast. Weasel Tunneler is a cool troll card, but you have to draw a 1-mana 1/1. You can possibly cheat it out with Small Time Recruits or Desert Camel, but probably not worth the effort. Gadgetzan Socialite is probably worse than Voodoo Doctor, which doesn't see any play. Even though Blowgill Sniper is a Murloc, its stats are too weak, the battle cry is too weak. Not going to be the card that makes it into even a Murloc deck, I think. Instead of playing Toxic Sewer Ooze, play Acidic Swamp Ooze. Instead of playing Street Trickster, play either Cobalt Geomancer or Frigid Snowbolt. A 3-mana 4/3 hired gun is not going to make it into Constructed. Blubber Baron starts off with too few stats and shares Bolvar 4 Dragon's same weakness that if you top deck it, it's really bad and it's too much effort. It doesn't even have the base stat. Its base stat line is terrible, which is its main weakness. Backstreet Leper's stats and the effect are too weak. The 3-mana 3/1 slot. If you wanted to play something like this, play Wolf Rider instead. Organ Greaser, 4-mana 6/3 stat simply isn't enough. 2 mana can trade into it. Daenerys Hogchopper's effect is pretty powerful if it is a 4-mana 4/4 charge, but the amount of times the opponent's hand is going to be empty isn't enough, which means it's going to be a 4-mana 4/4, which is terrible. Kooky Chemist is Crazed Alchemist's bigger brother. Crazed Alchemist actually sees a little bit of play in Zoo, like as a 1 of tech card sometimes. A 2-mana 2/2 is better than a 4-mana 4/4, I suppose. It's cheap enough to get into play and kill totems, kill doomsayers. You don't really need this one. Daring Reporter is a 4-mana 3/3 and at least a 4-mana 4/4 since you pass it to the opponent and then they draw a card. Still, I don't see mill decks using this where you want to cause your opponent to draw, and I don't really see this seeing like counterplay because you force your opponent not to draw cards, but the payoff isn't big enough. And they can just kill your 4-mana 4/4 pretty easily. Backroom Bouncer, the 4-mana 4/4 stat line isn't good enough. It can sometimes be a 4-mana 6/4 if you manage to trade off 2 friendly minions the turn that you play it, but even a 4-mana 6/4 I don't think is that good. Streetwise Investigator's 5-mana 4/6 stat line is a bit low for the very specific tech effect. I would have made this a 5/6, which I know is power creep, but the effect isn't really doing much and Pit Fighter isn't being played. Spiked Hog Rider is a 5-mana 5/5, which punishes Taunt, but if you wanted to punish Taunt, you should just play Black Knight instead. Red Mana Worm is a 5-mana 2/6, and it requires you to cast 2 spells in order for it to be competitive. It's really tough to cast 2 spells in the same turn that you play Red Mana Worm, so it's not practical because the mana cost is so high. Gurkfu Master is a 1-mana discount for 1 less attack on Wind Fury Harpy. Wind Fury Harpy is one of the worst cards in Hearthstone. Gurkfu Master is also one of the worst cards in Hearthstone. Welcome to the club. Big Time Racketeer. This is the first card that is a 1 star, which isn't terrible in Arena, since it creates like 7 cent of stats. I actually considered, this is I think one of the only cards I considered moving to the 2-star category. Because if you brand Bronzebeard Big Time Racketeer, then brand Bronzebeard's effect is really big. But I think that there's not enough room to put in the Big Time Racketeer in a constructed level serious deck. On its own, it's simply not powerful enough. Wind Up Burglebot is far too weak. A 6-mana 5/5 stat line isn't enough, and the only payoff is that when it attacks and survives, you draw a card. There's actually going to be a better card drawing mechanism for neutral if you want it. Leatherclad Hog Leader is a card that punishes opponents that have a lot of cards in hand, but it's not really punishing enough and the stat line is too weak, and it's not common enough for the opponent to have 6 or more cards in hand. I would have made this a 7-6. I think that the hog cards were kind of a missed opportunity for Blizzard to introduce like counters to certain types of play. Like, it's cool, the idea of punishing your opponent when they have some kind of requirement, but the requirements are too tough and the stat lines are too bad. Ancient of Blossom's stat line is too weak. Just play Bog Creeper instead, where you pay 1 extra mana for 3 extra attack. Mayor Noggenfogger is kind of the token crazy legendary of the set, kind of like Yogg-Saron. This card won't see any play because of the precedent of Mogre the Ogre, which had higher stats and made attacks random. Yes, this also affects spells, but not really that great. In fact, if it's the only target on the board, you can still just Shield Slam it because Shield Slam can't be redirected. All targets still have to be legal. Piranha Launcher is a 5 mana card, which gets you value over the long term if you get attacked 4 times, but it is too slow. I'm not even sure that you get enough value if you attack 4 times with it. Cabal Chemist is the only tri-card to make it into the 1-star slot. When I first reviewed it, I had no idea how good a potion was going to be, and there are some good potions out there. Notably, Fellfire Potion and Dragonfire Potion are really good. The amount of bad potions out there are so many, and it's a random potion. It's just so much worse than drawing a card, I would say. Even though the Cabal rewards playing one-ofs in your deck, I actually built some Cabal decks for Mage, Priest, and Warlock, and nowhere did I even consider putting in Cabal Chemist, which is why I rated it 1 star. In Arena, this card is going to be okay. So speaking of potions, Potion of Polymorph is not going to see any play, even with the 1 mana 2/1 play a secret for free guy, Cabal Lackey. You don't get to control what you sheep, and controlling what you sheep is kind of a big deal. It's bad. Cryomancer, 5 mana 5/5, can be a 7/7 if you accomplish the goal. You would presumably put Cryomancer into a deck where you have freezing effects, so you could call this a 5 mana 7/7 a lot of times, but I think the payoff is just not big enough. There's no decks that really support this kind of play right now, and I think this is not a card that has a high enough payoff that will cause the creation of such a deck. Greater Arcane Missiles, at 7 mana, you need to be able to have a spell that competes with Flame Strike and Fireland's Portal, and you can't put in that many in a deck. It simply doesn't do as much AoE damage as Flame Strike. It's random, and if you wanted to hit face, that's pretty tough to pull off as well. Although 7 mana deal 9, I have to admit, is not bad. Blood Fury Potion is a 3 mana Blessing of Might, and sometimes, well, this is the goal, you would get +3/+3 on a demon, but it's not good enough to cause the creation to want to put more demons in. If the best case scenario is a 3 mana +3/+3, that's not so good. Yes, Demon Fire is played very lightly in Zoo, but that's mainly because deal 2 damage is significantly better than +3 attack. Sea Devil Stinger is one of those 1-star cards which could possibly be good in the future, but I rated this 1 star because in this version of Standard it's not going to be good enough. I tried to build a Murloc Warlock deck, and I found it severely worse than Zoo. So I'm not going to build a deck that's like nearly strictly worse. For what it's worth though, this card is good in a Murloc deck. Coolly Unshackled is the Cabal Warlock Legendary, which we failed to vote. Probably good news that we didn't, since we would have been disappointed. Isn't worth it even if you already have a Reno Lock deck, which is shocking. Possibly in the future when there are better demons out there. Now, no. Just play N'Zoth instead. With Pilfered Power, you can live the dream. You can go turn 1, Living Roots, coin, Innervate, Pilfered Power, and then be on 4 mana. But the dream doesn't happen often enough. This is probably meant for the type of aggressive deck where you go turn 1 Living Roots, turn 2 like a beast, like a 3/2 or something. It's just very inconsistent, and that inconsistency makes it go into the 1-star category, where it will often have no effect, or by the time it has an effect, it will not be worth the effect. The Rogue gets a lot of entries into the 1-star, I'm afraid. Starting with Gadgetzan Ferryman, youthful brewmaster with a bit of a twist, and while you can reward the Jade Golem type of play by playing your Jade Golem creator and then bouncing it, and then playing it again later, I tried to build that deck and I found it very, very slow and lacking. So I don't think that'll work out, so Ferryman goes into the 1-star. Shadow Rager is a very cute card, and it dies to Ravaging Ghoul and Maelstrom Portal, which I expect to still be very popular. So no. I have to admit I was a little bit surprised to put Shadow Sensei into the 1-star category. It's a 4-mana 4/4 which has a +2/+2 buff, which compares favorably compared to Houndmaster, which is a 4-mana 4/3, give a beast +2/+2. However, I don't think the tools are out there right now for a stealth rogue deck. This is the kind of card rating that I'd have to sit down and try to build a deck around and fail to, and then say, okay, I failed, this isn't going to see play yet. But it's a step in the right direction. With more stealth cards, you could see Shadow Sensei raise to be played. Someday it'll be a good card, but not today. Given that I don't think that a mid-rangey type of rogue is going to exist, and even if it did, I'm not sure Lotus Assassin would make the cut. It's a slightly better Stranglethorn Tiger, which doesn't make the cut. Lucky Do Buccaneer is a card that has potential to be unfair. It's a 6-mana 9/9. Basically, I compared mid-range rogue to mid-range shaman, and it's not better. It's not anywhere close. So while a 6-mana 9/9 is pretty unfair, and is a step in the right direction, Rogue doesn't have the tools to support this yet. So Rogue is kind of getting the setup, I think, with this expansion. There's a lot of interesting cards, but I don't think a deck can be created. In a vacuum, these cards aren't bad, and actually this card is potentially really good in Arena. And even in Constructed, a 6-mana 9/9 is great. It's just that the condition is surprisingly difficult to fulfill in Rogue. Yes, there's Deadly Poison, but still surprisingly difficult to fulfill. And Finders Keepers. There are a lot of Discover cards in this set. This is the one that I've rated 1-star, because paying 2 mana to choose a Overload card out of 3 cards isn't good enough. Dirty Rat is a card that I considered putting onto the 1-star category, and I probably should have, but I took pity on the rat. Dirty Rat has some very fringe applications where it can ruin combos. So that's why I made it into a 2-star. You can grab their Alex Strawzad if it's Freeze Mage, and then it'll be very difficult for them to burn you. Has some application in very fringe categories. Friendly Bartender. 2 mana 2/3, it's a very minor effect of restoring 1 health to your hero, but in a very aggressive metagame, I could see this happening. If the meta were somehow to turn into very aggressive, Friendly Bartender is there to serve you some health. This might be a little bit of a surprise, but I rated Sergeant Sally a 2-star. She's got a very flashy effect, and she can be buffed by the Grimy Goons, and she can be power overwhelming. It's just that I found that there was too much setup required. Sergeant Sally's problem is that she isn't good by herself, and the best she can do is to pair with exactly power overwhelming. I tried to make this work, I couldn't, but I didn't rate her a 1-star because I think that you might be able to. Felric Soulfiend has some interesting applications in Priest, but I think he's outclassed by Injured Blade Master. Even if you resurrect the Felric Soulfiend, it is significantly worse than the Injured Blade Master because he'll keep damaging himself. It's a little bit surprising to rate Auction Master Beardo a 2-star, because he is outworst at 3 mana 3/4. But the problem is 3 mana 3/4 doesn't cut it, and the effect isn't strong enough. There are some very cool combos you can do with the Auction Master Beardo, but I think those applications are too fringe to actually use. I could see this having fringe possibilities in specifically Raza Priest, since having free hero powers makes this more practical, which might mean that it merits more of a 3-star rating. But overall, here's the bucket I decided to put it in. Hosen Healer. It is a 2/6 for 4, which isn't that far off the mark. It's just that the Battlecry of restoring a minion to full health isn't that impactful. Minion combat tends to be pretty lethal, and it's too slow with Akanai Soul Priest. Bomb Squad is actually an interesting card, and It always hurts me to rate cards that are interesting at like 2-star. It's a way for all classes to have access to a good amount of direct damage. The drawback is a bit too much, and you can only deal damage to minions for face decks, and that is not the place. Defies Cleaner is a cool big card and has some potential if the format ever gets to a bunch of death rattles, but I don't really see that happening. It's a pretty significant commitment to put a 6-drop into a deck, and Defies Cleaner is too specific to do so. Grime Street Informant, and spoiler, I actually rated every single Discover a Tri-Class card a 2-star, and I feel like I'm gonna have to explain that. This one's a 2-mana 1/1 Discover a Hunter, Paladin, or Warrior card. This one's probably one of the easier ones to explain. Why not run Novice Engineer instead? Also 2-mana 1/1 Draw a card. This one draws a card, with the effect that it can discover some crazy hijinks, like you can get Savannah Hymen as a warrior, True Silver Champion as a hunter, you can get Upgrade as a hunter, you can get Upgrade as a paladin, upgrade your Ashbringer. I feel like these cards were kind of toned down in power just because of the crazy hijinks. Stat line turns out to just be too weak across all of the Discover a Tri-Class cards. Grimscale Chum. This was actually a very efficient Paladin Murloc card. It's like a 1-mana 3/2 worth of value. My main problem with this card is that I could not find a good enough Murloc Paladin deck. Ultimately, I decided that if you wanted to go with this Flood deck, the Zood would be better. This is one I have to be a bit cautious on saying though, because I do see some potential for this card. I know a guy. Turns out that instead of paying 1 mana to discover a taunt minion, of which you'll have a higher chance of discovering your class minions, you should just run those cards. Yes, there's a few good ones like Fierce Monkey and Bloodhoof Brave, but you should just run those cards instead of paying an extra mana for the flexibility. Public Defender is a very interestingly statted card, and I do see some potential in it as well. If you buff this with your hand buff mechanics, you can get this to be a threat. The main problem is that it's useless on its own. Almost useless. This one was a tough one for me to rate 2 stars, but I actually think it is the best courier. However, I still decided to do so, despite the possibility of Reno decks like running this as a 1-of. And let me explain why. So for Mage, you have Arcane Intellect, which for 3 mana you draw 2 cards. This one puts out a 2/2 body and kind of draws a card. Ultimately, Life Tap, Thought Steal, Arcane Intellect all outclass it. I thought that it wouldn't see play, and I tried to build a Reno deck in each, and I ultimately found a better card than Cabal Courier. This one's a bit of a risk to put at 2-star though. 0 mana Freezing Potion has some interesting applications. It's a 0 mana spell. Every single 0 mana spell deserves to have some look into it, since it can activate Flamewaker, since it can activate Gadgetzan Auctioneer, but the effect is just too small. A Cabal Lackey. If there were better secrets out there, then perhaps it would have been rated more than just a 2-star. So suppose you're running a deck, a Tempo Mage probably, with Cabal Lackey. Are you going to keep your hand of Cabal Lackey, Counterspell, and or Mirror Entity in your opening hand? Perhaps if there were more better proactive secrets. Mirror Entity copies something too early, Counterspell has a chance of hitting their coin if you're playing it on turn 1. If you develop the slower secrets like Ice Block and Ice Barrier, you probably shouldn't be playing Cabal Lackey. Cabal Crystal Runner, seen by many as a potential threat to be the next thing from below, I'm going to rate as just 2 stars. I don't think it'll work. The secret enablers aren't powerful enough, and the secrets in Mage aren't powerful enough. Lotus Agents was one that I actually thought about putting into these Druid, Rogue, and Shaman decks, especially in the Jade decks, because it turns out there aren't that many cards with the Jade Golem mechanic. So I was like, I can put in Lotus Agents and get a stab at them. But then I did the calculations, and each class has like 60 class cards, and there are only about like 2, 3, or 4, depending on the Druid, Rogue, or Shaman, of the Jade Golem creation cards, which is a very small percentage chance of getting them. It's not worth running a 5-mana 5/3. Celestial Dreamer is a 3-mana 3/3, which isn't bad by itself, but remember I called Auction Master Beardo 2-star, so 3-mana 3/4 isn't being played. 3-mana 3/3 isn't going to see that much play. If a friendly minion is 5 or more attacking, +2/+2, I feel like it's difficult enough to get that to happen that it will not see play. Yes, your Jade Golem can be cast pretty inexpensively, possibly even for 1 mana, and then be a 5/5, and then you can cast your Celestial Dreamer. But I think at that point in the game where your Jade Golems are at 5, you're not going to be playing Celestial Dreamer. Also, there's no room in the deck for that. Lunar Visions. I compared this card with Nourish. So Lunar Visions is draw 2 cards. Nourish, you draw 3 cards. But the benefit of Lunar Visions is you have minions drawn cost 2 less. So I decided to seriously look into the deck where this would be best. I thought it would be Beast Druid, because that is a minion-heavy deck. And indeed, I tweaked around with the Beast Druid deck, and I got to around possibly 20 minions. That's going to mean about 1.33 cards are going to get their cost reduced. That means the cost reduction is going to be about 2.66 in a 20 minion deck. That means Lunar Visions costs maybe like 2.4 mana, rounding. But here's the problem. You're front-loading the mana, and then your minions drawn are costing less. Front-loading the mana is not a good thing. It's like the reverse of Overload. Vermin Sensei. The stats aren't bad. It's 5 mana 4/5, which buffs for +2/+2, which means it's like a 5 mana 6/7. But the main problem is that Beast Druid does run a lot of cards in the 5 slot between Druid of the Claw, Azure Drake, and Stranglethorn Tiger. That it is difficult to put it in. And there's not enough cards in this expansion to buff Beast Druid more. So I don't see Beast Druid getting stronger. Beast Druid is not currently a strong deck, so I don't see Vermin Sensei being strong. Devolve saw much hype when it was announced, but it turns out that you just play Maelstrom, Portal, Lightning Storm, and Hex instead. And there's not that, you can't fit in all the spells to deal with opponents' minions. You need some space for other things too. And those 6 cards are so good that you can't cut any of them. Yes, Devolve plays around N'Zoth type things, but Hex does that just fine. And yes, Devolve AoEs the entire board and kind of silences as well, but Master Spell was never played. Calling the finishers. Maybe I should have rated this card a 1-star, but somewhere deep inside I was holding out hope that a every fin can happen deck would happen. It is decent value, 4 mana for 4 1/1s. What am I kidding? You just get Ravaging Ghoul, you get Maelstrom Portal. I probably mismarked this one. Alright, now we're getting into the 3-star cards. The cards I think have some serious potential to be good. Starting with Small Time Buccaneer. A card that has the potential to be a 1 mana 3/2 is going to be good, especially since this is meant to be in a pirate deck. It's meant to be in an aggressive deck. I just wasn't sure that you would fit this card in. I wasn't sure if it would fit. Naga Corsair is kind of similar. 4 mana 5/4 is decent. Battlecry, give your weapon +1 attack, that's decent. It feels like it's at the edge of the stat line, which is good. I just wasn't certain that it would be good enough to put into one of those aggressive decks with weapons. Burgly Bully. These cards are kind of sharing a theme. It's a 5 mana 4/6, which has a decent ability on it. Like, the stat line is there, the effect is good. You want to play Burgly Bully to secure the board when your opponent has no minions on, and then they're forced to either play minions, which your Burgly Bully might be able to trade into well, or they're forced to play spells, which will give you coins, which would mean Burgly Bully might be a 4/6 if they play a spell. But here's the thing, even though coins are spells and they're kind of nice, you can use them with Gadgetzan Auctioneers, I felt like there just wasn't enough room to put this in to the deck. It's almost there, but just not quite good enough to put into the deck. But it might be. Second Rate Bruiser is not in the 2-star category and has made its way into the 3-star because I really like 3 mana 4/5s against aggressive decks. And this is clearly meant to be a card to counter a minion-based strategy. 3 mana 4/5 Taunt is a good card. It's going to depend on the meta on whether or not there are many minions out. Currently, I'm not foreseeing that meta, but it's difficult to see that far into the future. Madame Goya is mainly a 3-star because I'm confused. She's a 6 mana 4/3, you get to choose friendly minion, swap with a minion in your deck. I felt like when I first reviewed her that I was going to need to see her in action before deciding. I kind of talked to myself for like 5 minutes to 10 minutes on the first time that I saw the card and I still don't really know. You might even be able to put it into the question mark category instead of the 3-star category if I were to hold like a point of view. And to some extent, the 3-star category is the question mark category. I see potential in it, but I don't actually see her in a deck yet. When you see the positive side, that's clearly really good. But when you see the negative side, say you Madame Goya a totem, and then you get like a 2-drop, someday you're going to draw a totem. You might be surprised to see Hidden Cash get this higher rating, since they have a card that does it better. But the thing with Hidden Cash is that it is quite possibly and probably going to be played for free. You might play it with Cloaked Huntress. But here's the thing also, I messed around with it a bit and I couldn't fit in like all the card buffing mechanisms into Cloaked Huntress Hunter. I'm just leaving it out there that this card might be a hidden gem. Small Time Recruits is a card that has a lot of potential. 3 mana, draw 3 1-cost minions. That certainly could be really good. So the question then is, why not just run Divine Favor? Then perhaps you're not just drawing your 1-cost minions as well. 3 draw 3 is great, but the specific deck that this fits in is uncertain at the moment. By the time you play your Small Time Recruits, you usually will be out of range to buff those cards, and I was thinking, if you're gonna play those cards, it's tough to even put in spells, because you kind of need to buff your stuff. So I was thinking, instead of running Small Time Recruits, you run Fight Promoter in that deck. It strikes me as a card that's either going to be great or like trash. Getaway Kodo is a card that reminds me a lot of Duplicate. It costs 2 fewer mana, and you can just return the card to your hand. You play this card on a really powerful minion like Tyrion. You get the setup going. It's like 1 mana draw a Tyrion. When I thought about it that way, I was like, this card might actually have potential. It could also be complete trash that is never seen. Potentially better than 1 mana draw a card. Because it could be 1 mana draw a very specific card. I couldn't find a deck to put this in yet, but I see it as possibly good. Grime Spree Protector. That's a card with a lot of stats. Main problem is that it obviously fits into a more mid-range Paladin deck. You need to have minions out on the board to play Grime Spree Protector. It's not something that's good standalone, because standalone is just a 7 mana 6/6 taunt. Or a 9 mana 6/6 taunt and give your button guy, or Silverhand Recruit, Divine Shield. Do you put that into your kind of just generic buffing everything Paladin deck? Maybe it fits, maybe it's a bit too heavy to put in there. Time will tell. Ally Armorsmith is a card that I saw potential with the hand buffing mechanism. It's a card that gets quite a bit better after you buff it. It basically gets double benefit. Not only do you gain more health to block things, you also gain more armor whenever its damage increases. And I will actually personally be trying out a deck with this and a card that I rated 2-star, the Public Defender. Just these taunt minions which have high health stat values with stolen goods. The main question is whether or not the stolen goods deck is going to be good. Stolen goods is a card that I also rated 3-star. I see that it has potential. It could be good. I'm just not sure. 2 mana for 3/3, especially given that some of the taunts that you can give this to, that could be good. Hard to say at the moment. Feels like something I have to see in practice. Stolen Goods Ally Armorsmith is kind of a combo that strikes me as very similar to Protect the King plus Bolster. Now, I actually rated Protect the King as pretty bad, but I still gave it a shot, and it turned out to be like not as bad as I had thought. Stolen Goods strikes me as quite a bit better than Protect the King, and Ally Armorsmith isn't bad by itself. So that's why these have more potential, and I'm more optimistic about them than Protect the King. Volcanic Potion I've rated as 3 stars. I see it as a possible addition to the Reno Mage deck, and I think it's in exactly that deck where it might see a 1-of. Mage does have a lot of AoE, but certainly could make it in there. Manic Soulcaster is actually also a card in exactly that deck. Shares mostly the same reasoning as Volcanic Potion. I could see this as a 1-of in Reno. There's actually a few cards in Reno Mage that you would be very excited to shuffle back into your deck to get another try to play. And at worst, it's a 3-mana 3/4. Perhaps it's surprising that in a Reno Mage deck that there are actually 30 cards that can be played that are better than Manic Soulcaster, which is why I'm quite optimistic about Reno Mage and Reno Priest. I could also see some play in a new archetype of like Grinder Mage, and this lets you basically fatigue 2 slower. But I still rate it at just 3 stars because it's uncertain whether or not this type of deck will develop, and whether or not it will even make the cut in Reno Mage. Mana Geode, perhaps a surprise. A lot of people heralded this as like the 2-drop that'll make priests great. Perhaps I actually bought into a little bit of the hype because the more I look at this card, the more I think maybe I shouldn't even rate this a 3-star. Maybe it belongs in a 2-star. It's a 2-mana 2/3. I actually have to admit, I just put this into the 3-star because I knew it wasn't going to be put into the 5-star. I knew it wasn't going to be put into the 4-star. And yet I didn't want to put it in the 2-star category because I was like, yeah, it looks good. Doesn't seem that good in Reno Priest. Doesn't seem that good in Control Priest. Seems good in Zoo Priest. That doesn't exist right now. We'll leave this as 3-star, but with like the asterisk, it probably should be lower. A Greater Healing Potion. That's a lot of healing, but it is in the class that can heal already by default. I'm not sure whether or not a copy of this will make it into Control Priest. I'm not sure whether or not a copy of this will make it into Reno Priest. But it might. That's a lot of healing. You might be surprised to see Blast Crystal Potion rated this highly. Potentially exactly a 1-of in Reno luck. That's pretty much the only explanation. It could be 4 mana, destroy a minion in the late game. In a panic pinch, if your opponent plays something like a 4 mana 7/7 that you can't deal with, if that is ever a thing again, blast it. Might even be great in a super aggressive deck, which doesn't really exist yet. But if your like end game is 4 mana, then bam, there you have it. Mark of the Lotus. Sure looks good. Power of the Wild's +1/+side at a 1 mana discount. The reason why this is at 3 stars is because I'm not sure whether or not it makes it into the token druid deck. Is that deck even still around? Will it still be around? You might be surprised to see Shaku the Collector here. Maybe you thought it was worse, but I see great potential in Shaku the Collector. You might just wonder, why is this not just Undercity Huckster? 2 mana 2/2, add a random card to your hand, Death Rattle. Well, here's the thing. Shaku the Collector, where it is obviously better than Undercity Huckster, is its potential to draw another card. You draw 2 cards with it, and you're starting to look like Manatite Totem. Maybe there's enough cards out there of Burglary to make the Ethereal Peddler deck now. Maybe there's enough to make a Tempo Rogue deck a thing. I'll be trying this card out, and I think it's a lot better than it looks. Lotus Illusionist is a card that I'm actually very excited about myself. She can transform into a random 6-cost minion. You're paying 4 mana for like a random 6-cost. And Midrange Shaman right now has openings in the 4 slot. I think it might make its way into there, but I'm not certain. I'm not certain if it's better than Barnes. I'm not certain that the card is fast enough. On top of that, it's possible that this is meant for another type of deck, another type of mid-range shaman, one with Master of Evolution, one that plays around with costs. When I take a closer look at the 3-star category, I actually start to realize that instead of thinking about this as average, consider it more of my, I'm not sure whether or not these cards are good or bad, which kind of counts as average, but it's not like, in Hearthstone there isn't really an average. Either a card is good enough to make it into your deck or not. And I feel like these are like those types of cards. Now we're on to the good stuff, the 4 stars, the stuff that I was pretty certain would make the cut into good decks. We start with Mistress of Mixtures. My beloved Zombie Chow finally back. A 1 mana 2/2 instead of a 2/3. Restores 4 health to both players instead of just to the opponent, which makes it a better late game card than Zombie Chow, but slightly less good early game because cannot survive 2 attack. Still though, I see this as the go-to card for control decks if they want to stop the bleeding or they want an early game play. Reno decks in particular will probably run 1 copy of her. Genzo the Shark. So the reason why I didn't put this in 3-star, but instead I bumped it up to 4, even though the deck doesn't currently exist out there, I feel like this will be put into the deck which runs out of cards fairly quickly. It could be Paladins with their Flood. It could be a more aggressive type of Warlock. It could be a Murloc deck somewhere out there. 4 mana 5/4 stat line is fine, but the effect of when it attacks, you draw 3. Man, I like that. The setup is simple. You play them on turn 4. On turn 5, you play the rest of your cards. You attack and you draw 3. Better than Jeeves in the sense that it's a 5/4 instead of a 1/4. Worse than Jeeves in the sense that it's not immediate, but requires a little bit of finesse and setup. This is the type of finesse and setup I like in my aggressive deck. Finja the Flying Star. Boy, have I come a long way. The first time I reviewed this at BlizzCon, I said, slow. How good is it really to summon 2 Murlocs from your deck anyways? It turns out that it's actually really good to summon 2 Murlocs from your deck. Anything can happen decks play Barnes, which is a 4 mana 3/4, which summons 1 Murloc. This, pulls the Murlocs out of your deck, puts them into play. It will see play in Murloc decks probably as well, because it compares a lot to Azure Drake, 5 mana 4/4 draw a card. This not only draws a card, it not only draws 2 cards, it draws the cards and then puts them into play. Why is it not a 5-star? Well, I'm not sure whether or not the Anything Can Happen deck will be good enough, 1. 2, I'm not sure if Murloc decks will be a thing. So for Wrathion, I did the math. 6 mana 4/5, you draw at least 1 card always, and it has Taunt. That by itself, it probably wouldn't be exciting to write home about. You would just play the Azure Drake, 5 mana 4/4 draw a card. You gain 1 mana, you gain 1 health, you gain Taunt. That's not too bad. You could see that conceivably. Where it really gets value is if you're playing it in a dragon deck. Suppose you're running about a third of your deck as dragons. You're going to, on average, draw 1.5 cards. It means that a majority of the time you're drawing 1 card, but sometimes you're drawing 2 cards, even fewer times you're drawing 3 cards. Very occasionally you're drawing 4 cards, but it all averages out to about 1.5. The chances get better the more dragons you have in there as well. And I feel like that's good enough to warrant a slot in the dragon deck. Dragon Priest is the most obvious one since they have Dragonfire Potion. And who knows, sometimes you play Wrathion and you draw all your dragons. And that is sometimes good and sometimes terrible. Grime Street Smuggler. I felt a little bit strange putting this card at 4 stars, and as we get up to the 5-star area, I'm going to state the interesting thing about this expansion. There's going to kind of be more 5 stars on the concept that there's so few of the mechanic that you want in a deck. The hand buff mechanic is good. For Jade Lotus, summoning Jade Golems is good. It's just that there aren't enough cards that do it. So you start to go into the Grime Street Smuggler. I don't think the Grime Street Smuggler is that good of value. It's like a 3 mana 3/5, but it's a delayed 3 mana 3/5. By itself, it wouldn't be that good, but it's with all the other hand buff mechanisms that make the card good. But seems decent. It's a 3 mana 3/5. It's like the worst of the hand buffers. Sleep with the Fishes. It's like Hellfire discounted by 2, but you have to damage them all first. But that's not a hoop that Warrior has that much problem jumping through. I think that this is excellent with Ravaging Ghoul. You're dealing 4 damage to all damage minions except your Ravaging Gul'dan, and the Ravaging Ghoul will damage all of them first. You can put this with the Pyromancer and Commanding Shout to combo 5 damage to all minions, and have a 3/1 Pyromancer left over. Watch out for this little guy, or you'll be sleeping with the fishes. Grime Street Pawnbroker. Well, I mean, she's a 3/3 and she comes with an upgrade. If you think upgrade is a good card, then that means you're paying 2 mana for a 3/3, you're drawing a upgrade, and you're playing it. Now, it is setting up for a card in your hand, so it's not quite as good as that. You still have to play the weapon afterwards, but maybe it's even better because you get to play the weapon and immediately have the benefit of the upgrade. Seems great in a variety of decks, mostly those that are good with upgrades, so mostly the aggressive pirate decks. I just wasn't absolutely sure that this would make the cut there. Also, Grime Street Pawnbroker is good with Brass Knuckles. This is a card that you might be very surprised that I rated so highly. And that's because I actually build decks before rating cards, I suppose. And Brass Knuckles made it into my Control Warrior deck. It made it into my hand buffing Control Warrior deck. because that is 3 buffs. It's +3/+3, which I was on the fence of whether or not it was good on. Same as Stolen Goods, the 2 mana from Stolen Goods, which is giving a +3/+3, and you're paying 2 mana for a 2/3 weapon along with that, and you're combining them into 1. As long as you can hold out for the 3 attacks, which I think you can. And it's even better than Stolen Goods, because you don't have to hit it on a taunt. Because the target that you want to hit this on is on Doppelgangster. If Doppelgangster didn't exist, I'll agree with you. Brass Knuckles is trash, but I feel like Doppelgangster Control will be a deck, and I feel like Brass Knuckles will go into there. Call this the reach call from me this time around. This cute little cat, alley cat. Very simple, 1 mana 1/1 summons a 1/1 cat. They're both beasts. The 1/1 cat is adorable. Absolutely adorable, and that's why the card is so powerful. No, other than that, in a world where mid-range Hunter is actually running Argent Square and Fiery Bat, 2 1/1s is pretty good. Knuckles! I was actually surprised to rate this card 4 stars. When I first looked at it, I was like, 3/7 for 5 mana. It falls under my rating of like a good statted minion. But here's the thing. Knuckles benefits like double with hand buff mechanics. You're gonna play this with a hand buff deck, I think. And you're gonna hand buff Knuckles. And it's gonna have so much health. And you're gonna punch minions. And then you're going to also punch face. Good stuff. Potion of Madness is a 3 mana discount on Shadow Madness. The only downside it has is it only hits things that are 2 or less attack instead of 3 or less attack. But boy, if that is in the meta, this is a very powerful card indeed. Pint-sized Potion combos with Potion of Madness. They're cheap enough to easily combo together as well. The reason why Pint-sized Potion is this high up is because it's going to make Shadow Word Horror great again. Instead of the Akanai Circle clear, now you can do Pint-sized Potion plus Shadow Word Horror. Now, why would you choose one over the other? Well, Shadow Word Horror is decent in a meta of a lot of small minions. Maybe that happens. And Pint-sized Potion makes Shadow Word Horror, like, kill anything that's 5 or fewer attack. That's a good combo. Cabal Talon Priest would probably be a 5-star in any other deck, but Priest is currently lacking a 2-drop. Yes, I know they have the Geode. 3 mana 3/7 is incredible, and that's a 3 mana 3/7 worth of total stats. The main problem is Priest needs to get a foothold on turn 2. Still, I think the Cabal Talon Priest is going to be good enough to run into Dragon Priest, because Dragon Priest can play a 1 mana 2/3 and a 2 mana 2/4 with Taunt. Cabal Songstealer, good generic minion. The reason why it's at 4 stars, not 5 stars, is because Darkshire Alchemist is a 5 mana 4/5, restore 5. That sure seemed like it would be generically good everywhere, but didn't quite make the cut. Saw some places. Cabal Songstealer, perhaps good. And on top of that, perhaps it creates a deck where Eerie Statue will be good. Unlicensed Apothecary. 3 mana 5/5. Wow, 3 mana 5/5. And whenever you summon a minion, deal 5 damage to your hero. It doesn't even have a drawback the turn that you play it. Turn that you play it, it's just a 3 mana 5/5. The main problem is in the future turns. The goal of Unlicensed Apothecary is you play the card, you do some trades with it, you possibly deal 5 damage with it, you possibly deal 10 damage with it if it trades into a Totem Golem and then it trades into something else. That's a really high statted minion. It'll see play in Reno Lock, probably. Crystal Weaver. This card buffs your Voidwalker, your Flame Imp, your Malchezaar's Imp, and your Imp Gang boss. And your Imp Gang boss's Imp. And that last one is pretty important because Imp Gang boss on 3 into Crystal Weaver on 4 could become a common play. You play your Imp Gang boss, you trade it into an opponent's minion, hopefully not killing your Imp Gang boss. You play Crystal Weaver buffing both the Imp Gang boss and the Imp. If that happens, 4 mana 7/6, and I think that'll happen a good enough amount of times that it could work. Jade Claws. If you can get to an average of a Jade Golem of a 3/3, which is to say you summon a 1/1, 2/2, 3/3, 4/4, 5/5, which is to say you summon 5 Jade Golems in the amount of time where a match is relevant, then it's a 2 mana 2/2, overload 1, summon a 3/3. Compare that with Totem Golem. That's really good. You're getting a 3/3 instead of a 3/4, you're overloading for 1 still, and you're getting a 2/2 weapon along with your Totem Golem. It's not quite the same because you front load weak Jade Golems. In fact, it's not anywhere near close to the same. You're getting actually a 2-mana 2/2 summon a 1/1 overload one. This card is still necessary to play if you're playing a Jade Golem Shaman deck, because there are very few cards that summon Jade Golems. The cards will either all stand together or fall together. And for now, I did build a mid-range Shaman Jade Golem deck, and it looked like it could be competitive with mid-range Shaman current incarnation. So consider that this card could be good, and this entire deck archetype could be good. Jade Lightning, same exact theory. If you're summoning 5 Jade Golems throughout the course of a game, Jade Lightning is great. If you're not, it's not going to be that good. And finally, the Jade Chieftain. You are either going to run all 3 of these cards, or you're going to run 0 of these cards, is what I came to the conclusion of, because there are so few Jade Golem cards out there. So Jade Chieftain, it's either going to be great, because you'll probably, at this point, again, if you're doing this average of summoning like 5 Jade Golems, you probably summon your 5th or 4th Jade Golem along with the Jade Chieftain, which means it'll be a 7-mana 5/5, summon a 4/4 of taunt, which is 9/9 in stats, or you're going to be summoning 10/10 of stats with 5. Or you're going to be summoning an 8/8 in stats, 3/3 of which has taunt. Counterfeit Coin. I actually think it's going to see play in Miracle Rogue. So this is going to depend on whether or not Miracle Rogue is good or bad, as this is, I believe, the only tool that Miracle Rogue gets. And I'm not even entirely sure whether or not it'll make it into the deck. Having played Miracle Rogue, having a coin with the Gadgetzan Auctioneer just feels so good. Imagine a 0-mana card that says gain 1 mana, draw a card. That would be absolutely ridiculous. And that's what Counterfeit Coin is with Gadgetzan Auctioneer. The Rogue Jade Golem cards also get the same treatment as the Shaman ones. I'm not entirely sure whether or not there's enough support. These two are actually the only Rogue Jade Golem cards, which is astounding when you actually think about it. So is that enough to make a deck? Well, you have the Unearthed Raptor possibly getting you another Jade Golem. Could be decent enough, but just doesn't seem like there's enough support. Jade Shuriken, deal 2 damage, summon a Jade Golem seems just better than the SI7 agent in the world where Jade Golem is good. We're gonna just have to see whether or not rogues can summon enough Jade Golems. You either play both these cards, or you don't. It is sad, isn't it? The Rogue Magma Rager took up that one slot that Rogue could have taken for another Jade Golem card to make it good. Alright, now we're on to the good stuff. The 5 stars. And we're starting with kind of a surprise to some people. Patches the Pirate looked very innocent. It's just a 1-mana 1/1 charge. So what Patches the Pirate was going to depend on was whether or not aggressive pirate decks were any good. Aggro Pirate Warrior is a real deck right now in Standard, which means they'll just be stronger with Patches the Pirate. Way back in the history of Hearthstone, this is before beta, Blizzard Hearthstone team decided, how are we going to balance the first player and second player advantage? Ultimately, they ended up giving second player an extra card and also the coin, but it used to be that second player's advantage used to be starting with a 0-mana 1/1. That's why cards like Babbling Book are good, and why Swashbuckler are good. You're paying 1 mana for a 1/1, and you're drawing a card that isn't even as good as one that you would put into your deck. But why is it so good? It's so good because it's a 1/1, and you can do something on turn 1. With Patches the Pirate, when you play your turn 1 N'Zoth First Mate, you're not only getting a 1/1, you're also getting another 1/1 with charge, and you're getting in 1 damage with that. Are they going to deal with it on turn 2? Are they going to hero power it? Well, I mean, hero powering Patches would be a really good result for you, because it means Patches the Pirate was like, at the start of your game, your opponent basically had to spend 2 mana to do nothing. Patches the Pirate is like your opponent starts at 27 health instead of 30, which is really good in an aggressive deck where you're usually just digging for that last point of damage. And it's super consistent because you're always going to summon a pirate early. The only part of inconsistency is if you draw Patches the Pirate, then it's just a Stone Tusk Boar, which is pretty bad, but it's not a disaster. Doppelgangster, which is actually one of the main reasons why hand buff mechanics are even that strong. If you're getting any buff onto Doppelgangster, it's like you're getting 3 buffs. I think that Doppelgangster will make an appearance in every single Grimy Goon hand buff card across Warrior, Hunter, and Paladin. It's going to have 3 very different styles, and I think they're all going to be great. And even if you miss with Doppelgangster, it's not a total disaster to summon 5 mana 3/2/2s. This is the card that the Grimy Goons love. Fight Promoter. Was Ancient of Lore good? It sure was. It got nerfed. Fight Promoter, all it takes is 2+1/+1 buffs or 1+2/+2 buff. You're playing a 6 mana 6/6, draw 2 cards. So I feel like this is going to make, alongside Doppelgangster, make the hand buff mechanic really strong. Don Honcho. That is a very powerful card because it's statted very aggressively. You add the stats together, which I believe you can do in a metagame that's slower, and I feel like the Grimy Goons metagame is going to slow down. There weren't that many aggressive cards printed. In fact, I can't even think of a single aggressive card. The general mechanics of Gadgetzan are slowly buffing your hand, they are building up Jade Golems, and they are singleton decks. So, will that slow down the meta? Of course it will. So Don Honcho, if you live to survive to play Don Honcho and the card it buffs, you're getting 7 mana for 10, 11 worth of stats. And if you get it on the Doppelgangster, you're getting 20, 21 of stats. That's a lot of stat value. 1 mana, give a random beast in your hand +2/+2. Well, besides 1 mana just for a 2/2 being decent, I'd mentioned if you play this on turn 1 and then turn 2, you got a 5/4 on turn 2. So I've also rated 2 of the Hunter Beasts, buff lover cards as 5 stars, which is part of the setup for why Smuggler's Crate is great. I've got Trog Beast Rager. So besides 2 mana 4/3s being pretty good, see Totem Golem, which is 2 mana 3/4. You might be surprised to see it at 5 stars, but it's going to see play in the buffs probably, so it's going to be great. That's a really efficient card. It's 3 mana 3/3, but actually kind of a 3 mana 5/5 since it's buffing minions in your hand. It has to die first. And this one's a random minion. This one's the one that possibly makes Doppelgangster really good in Hunter as well. You play the Shaky Sip Gunner, Coin Doppelgangster, or even play Doppelgangster. 3/4/4s is very powerful. Now, where all the synergy, the buff lovers, and why the hand buff cards are so good is because these buff lovers exist. Rat Pack's a 3 mana 2/2, which summons 2/1/1s when it dies, but with a simple +2/+2 on it, you're not only buffing this by just +2/+2, you're buffing it by kind of +4/+4 because you will end up summoning an extra 2 rats. So this is like a double buff benefit. Dispatch Kodo is also a double buff benefit. Not only do you buff its stats, you buff the battle cry. And the battle cry is already impressive of dealing 2 damage, but with a +2/+2 buff, you're dealing 4 damage. And you know what card's really good in mid-range right now? Fire Elemental. Yeah, I think Hunters are going to have a new deck for certain. This is going to kind of be the new mid-range Hunter, I think. Mean Street Marshal, which is a buff lover. You get 1 buff on this guy, and he's a 1 mana 1/2 draw a card. That's really good. Granted, you can't play this on turn 1, which is unfortunate, but you'll just have to play more of them later on. And with this card, you don't have to buff it in your hand as well. You can put it into play and then buff it, and then it'll draw a card when it dies. Most secure when you buff it in your hand and then play it, though. So how do you buff those cards? I figure that Paladins will run decks with lots of minions in them in order to have Smugglers run, and Grime Street Outfitter be great. So you're going to want to have a hand of like 3 minions, ideally, and Smugglers run if you're going first. Turn 1 Smugglers run. You buff your other 3 minions, that's +3/+3. Turn 2, maybe you play the Grime Street Outfitter. Hopefully you drew another minion. You give another 3 minions, +3/+3. And if you don't have a lot of minions in your hand for some reason, then you can hold them off. You can play them later. Maybe draw some cards first. If the Murloc Paladin ends up being good, then I'm certain you'll see the Grime Street Chum in it as well, along with Smuggler's Run and Grime Street Outfitter as well. Murlocs love getting buffed, and having a lot of minions is good with Grime Street Outfitter and Smuggler's Run. So that's some potential. Wicker Flame, Burn Bristle. So when you get this card to be buffed, you're getting a benefit of not only healing more to your hero, but also cards which have high attack and divine shield are good. And along with the card not being too bad by its own, Grime Street Enforcer is a smuggler's run that happens at the end of every single turn. So paladins will have 3 ways of buffing every single minion in your hand. And then hopefully you can refill with Fight Promoter and you can enjoy the benefits with Doppelgangster. And if it stays around, just like Emperor Thorisan, it's going to make your minions even bigger and bigger. On the warrior front, we've got Hobart Grapplehammer. Give all weapons in your hand and deck +1 attack. That just seems quite efficient. I even put this in a control deck because I had Brass Knuckles in it. And when your Brass Knuckles goes up from a 2-3 to a 3-3, it gets quite a bit better. But it could be in a face deck as well. You upgrade a bunch of your weapons. And Grimy Gadgeteer, even though the warrior doesn't have that many buff cards, the Grimy Gadgeteer is a really strong one, I feel, as it is a 4-mana 6/5 with the potential to get even bigger because it's a constant effect of each turn give +2/+2. I think with Warrior you specifically pair with Fight Promoter and with Doppelgangster, and perhaps you don't even pair with Fight Promoter. It's random minions, but you can run very few minions in your deck, in your control warrior. And I'm looking forward to building that deck too. Kazakus is the card that puts it all together. For the time that Kazakus and Reno are both in stand together, I feel like this is the moment for those two to shine together as a pair. So I think all of Priest, Warlock, and Mage are going to be viable Reno builds. So Kazakus seems very powerful, the spell is very powerful. We haven't actually played with it yet, but just seeing the effects seems strong. It's entirely possible that the entire house of cards of Reno will fall apart if Kazakus isn't actually as powerful as everyone thinks it is. But for now, I'm still on the Kazakus hype train. Seems at the very least that Kazakus is over the power curve to benefit to a no duplicate deck. Inkmaster Solia, this is the mage card which will, along with Kazakus, I think make a Reno mage great. 0 mana 5/5s have proven to be pretty good, and Inkmaster Solia will be effectively a 0 mana 5/5 when you play your Flame Strike, when you play your Firelands Portal, and it's gaining you 3 mana when you play Kazakus' 10 mana potion. And if you play Kazakus' 5 mana potion, because perhaps you weren't planning for it, perhaps because plans changed, or you play Fireball, then you're paying like a 3 mana 5/5, 2 mana 5/5, something along those lines. Clearly a very powerful card that's only allowable in a Reno deck. And with so many cards that are of reasonable or even high quality, that are all comparable enough to itself, I feel like Reno decks will be pretty good. Raza the Chained is the Priest Reno entry into Reno lock. Without Raza the Chained, Priest probably wouldn't be seen as a Reno deck, but Hearthstone's team and its infinite knowledge were like, Priest is kind of weak, maybe we could give Priest a different deck. I don't think it needs to be said that Raza the Chained is good in a Reno Priest. The only question is, will Reno Priest be good enough that Raza the Chained will pull it up? And I think it will be. On the other front of Priest is the Dragon Priest. And Draconid Operative is absolutely ridiculous. Azure Drake is a card that's being run everywhere, which is a 5 mana 4/4 draw a card. Draconid Operative gets +1/+2 stats on that. Is another dragon, which helps with your corruptors, it helps with your other dragon related synergies. Your opponent will usually have good cards in their deck, which means it's nearly as good as draw a card. Okay, fine. You guys can see the scruffy guy. The card that's going to make Dragon Priest like over the top, and the reign of mid-range Shaman shall be over. Dragonfire Potion. Most of what mid-range Shaman has right now all has 5 or fewer health, with notable exception of Thunderbluff Valiant. But at least you'll be clearing everything except the Thunderbluff Valiant, and Mr. Stakes will be pretty sad that he'll be alone. This isn't even just a 5 damage kill, deal damage to all minions. since your minions aren't going to be hit, since they're going to be dragons if you're playing them in a dragon priest, and if you're playing them in a control priest, possibly better than Light Bomb, which was dealing damage to your minions as well anyways. 5 damage is a lot. And for Warlock, even though their legendary was not any good in Reno Lock, they did get some very good cards for that deck. Enough that it will probably make Reno Lock competitive again. Fellfire Potion is a big AoE. It's just a good addition. Of course, Reno Lock will run it. Also, if Control Warlock ends up being a thing, then they'll probably run Fellfire Potion as well. Cabal Trafficker. I am a big fan of card advantage, and random demons are not as good as cards. So this is not a 6 mana 6/6 at the end of your turn draw a card, which would be absolutely insane, but it is somewhere near-ish to that, and I'm kind of treating it as draw a slightly less good card. And it's not just draw a card. Reno Locks can actually fatigue out because they draw too many cards. Cabal Trafficker, you're just adding these demons to your hand. And I feel like just the stat line is so powerful enough already that any card advantage along with it is good. So, Cabal Trafficker, great. Abyssal Enforcer. This card will also see it into the Reno deck and possibly a control deck of demons, or just a control Warlock deck. This could be the finisher. Maybe you don't see Leroy Faceless Power Overwhelming anymore because just big cards at the end will be good enough. So it's a 7 mana 6/6, which comes with a Hellfire. That's pretty good. Might be interesting that I rated a few other Summon a Jade Golem cards as 4-star, but I rate the 4 mana 2/3 a 5-star. Well, the reason is there's not that many Jade Golem cards, so if there are any Jade Golem cards, classes that work out, they will have Jade Spirit in them. And I suspect that Druid Jade Golem decks will work out. So I've decided to put Jade Spirit onto the 5-star category as well. If your average Jade Golem is a 3/3, this is a 4 mana 5/6. That's pretty good. And it gets you there. Aya Blackpaw, a card that's going to really, really be good if you get her down on turn 6. In the world where your average Jade Golem is a 3/3, Aya Blackpaw is like one of those ace legendaries that you may or may not draw throughout the course of a game, but if you do, you're not only boosting your Jade Golems by +2, but you're getting 2 of them. I think she is safe to be called a Dr. 6. If a Jade Golem deck is good, Aya Blackpaw, Dr. 6, easy. White Eyes, 5 mana 5/5 taunt. Death Rattle Shuffle a 5 mana 10/10 taunt into your deck. I think this is strong enough to justify just kind of fitting into mid-range Shaman. It appears to be a overall good card. Better in a deck that plans on drawing cards, so you might see more Mana Tides. Maybe it'll make N'Zoth Shaman a thing. Jinyu Water Speaker. Mid-range Shaman actually has a spot open in the 4 mana slot, and this is a mid-range card. There was a mid-range Shaman deck run at BlizzCon, which ran a copy of Healing Wave. Healing Wave coming at 1 extra mana and 1 extra overload with a 3/6, that's pretty good. This is also a very solid control Shaman card. And now onto our 5-star Druid cards and my favorite for the Jade Golem deck. It turns out that if you put all the Jade Golem cards into the current Malygos Druid and you take away Malygos and the Moonfires, I think you make possibly a stronger Druid. Jade Idol is usually going to be used to summon a 1/1 Jade Golem to start off the game. However, there are going to be many games where you're going to play Fandral in the later game, and then you play Jade Idol. And then that's where you're going to get a lot more Jade Golem cards. Because you need every single Jade Golem card. Getting more copies of a card that summons Jade Golems for cheap is pretty good. It's a really good Jade Golem starter. If you get both with Fandral and the game goes late, it's really good. Jade Blossom gets you your Mana Crystal and your Jade Golem. I think this is probably the weakest Jade Golem card, but just because there are so few, and because Jade Golem cards synergize so well with each other, I figure that you put in 2 copies of it as well. And if you cast this on turn 3, it is actually pretty good, because a Wild Growth combined with a Jade Golem That's very strong. Jade Behemoth. This is the end game Jade Golem card, and it's very well statted for the end game because you're getting a 6 health taunt and you're getting a Jade Golem. And the stats breakdown on this is pretty good. This is probably when you'll be getting the 3 or 4 Jade Golems. You can play it if you're on the verge of dying, or if you're not, you hopefully play your Dr. Sixth instead, i.e. Blackpaw. And finally, on 10 mana, Khun the Forgotten King. I had been uncertain on whether or not a 0 mana 7/7 that you can only play on turn 10 would be good enough. But I think it'll actually be good enough. In your current incarnation of Malygos Druid, you are almost always getting to the end anyways. You usually ramp enough, sometimes your Nourish ramps. So I think a 0 mana 7/7 that you can only play on turn 10 will still be good enough. And yes, sometimes you will choose gain 10 armor. It turns out that a lot of the time you actually want that armor at the end. I've played mid-range Shaman against Malygos Druid enough that sometimes they just stall with that gain 8 armor, Feral Rage at the end, and it helps out. Khun the Forgotten King will also be similar in that respect. I didn't go into rating the cards with any particular plan of how many of each I was going to put in, but I think it turned out to be a nice distribution. I've rated, out of the 132 cards, 37 1-star, 22 2-star, 19 3-star, 22 4-star, and 32 5-star. So I kind of tried to make sure to give my opinion on them instead of just hedging and put them in the middle, like 3-star. But still, only half are either really good or really bad. And then there's like enough cards in the middle. I think there's a really good variety, and I think the set is overall powerful.